And well, let me explain a little bit, share a little bit about myself, because you had a little difficulty with who is this guy. I think T probably got me invited by Jagadesh, and I knew T because I have been a volunteer speaker or teacher at the Lifelong Learning Institute over on Midlothian, which is a learning institute for people over 50. It's not an institution where you go. It's programs for education. And so I've been teaching there, teaching insight meditation there for the last 6 years. And I have no credentials in that I don't have, or degrees. I don't have any degrees in psychiatry or psychology or anything. I have a degree in English, and I taught English back in the 60s. So I have no guru or specific tradition or religion or path or anything of that nature. So I've come to you kind of like just as I am. I'm 80 years old, and I've been on this path since I got out of high school in 1955. And it's been a long journey. So I thought I would just, since you don't know who I am, I would share my story along with what I think I build myself as a Zen entertainer. Now, a Zen entertainer is, I just invented it. I got the idea from Alan Watts, who I've always listened to. When I get a teacher I resonate with, I just do them all the time. And then I find out, well, who did they resonate? And I'll go listen to them. But if you get a teacher like Eckhart Tolle or Alan Watts or some teacher that you resonate with, you really need to just make it a discipline and just do them every day until they become your voice. And you begin to hear what's behind the words, what's between the lines. And then you move on to another one. So anyway, getting back to Alan Watts, the one thing that just really resonated with him, because he would advertise or claim, I'm a spiritual entertainer. And it was obvious he just enjoyed just talking about what he loved, which was the transcendental path, which was the path. He just loved talking about it. And you knew he wasn't prepared. It didn't have notes, you know. It was just spontaneous talk, and go on for hours like that. And how do you do that? How do you let go? How do you release that faucet? How do you release that spontaneity in a controlled situation? So when I was teaching at LLI, I learned how to do that, because I would go, it was once a week, it was an hour and a half, and I would have, the class would start out with maybe 30 people, and it would weed down to about 10 or 7, because it lasted for 15 weeks. So every week I would go with just an idea that happened to me during the week or that morning or on the way there. And I would take that little seed idea and I would just water it with the live talk, with the surrender, and it would bloom into an hour and a half talk. So it's kind of like the teaching became my practice. The teaching became my Dharma path. Dharma is a practice that releases your life force. So the teaching became my path. So I learned from. If I give a talk and I don't get insights from it and learn from it myself, to me it's not a good talk. So I never come prepared. I did have. I do have prepared my life story. I know that, so I'm prepared to say. But I saw it in a new light today, and that was interesting. When you're 80 years old, you got a story, you got a long story, and you can look at your life in decades. Like, well, this decade I did that, and this decade I moved on and did that. So you can chop it up into decades or half decades or whatever you want. But as you become mature in your Dharma, in your truth, you begin to see your story as not only just a historical story, but a mythic story. It becomes everybody's story of realization, but it's your story. It's your unique story, but at the same time, it's everyone's story of realization, because it's only one story. See, there's only one story of waking up. But the paths are different, but the path is one. So I just thought of the idea today, of who am I? Well, I'm a Southside Yogi. Now, a Southside Yogi, back in just a little side note to compare that, I do have this is an hour talk, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Unless everybody leaves. Okay, so back in the 70s, I'll get back to this, what happened, but oddly enough, it was in Virginia, and I was a vegetarian meat truck driver. I drove that truck for 3 years, and I knew that I was the only vegetarian meat truck driver in the world. And so I'm the only Southside Yogi. In Southside Virginia, yoga and meditation is kind of, not now so much, but when I arrived there in 1981, it was something the devil did. Or yoga was something you ate. Well, I like blueberry yoga myself.
Yeah.
So, but now, times have changed, and you can find yoga and meditation here right in the middle of a city, big center, or go to a shopping mall and you got a flavor of yoga there. It might be all different kinds of flavors, But let me just share my story then, just as an outline, hopefully not get too long in that, and then we can see how that goes. But I guess my story started in, I said, high school, but I remember my earliest memories of dissatisfaction was being separated from my own experience. The sense of being out, and the best metaphor, and another thing, our life story is usually told by memories that are kind of metaphorical, that are memories that are packed with richness, with insight, It's like, that's my whole life, that one little memory. So the one little memory that was my whole life, particularly in those early years, well, I was in a new high school. My father was in the military, and so we moved every 2 years. So I didn't grow up in a hometown with roots. So I was in a new high school in San Diego, and everybody was 10 feet tall, and I didn't know anybody. And so during classroom, it was okay because you're in a classroom and you got a place. But it was during the recess, it was during the in-between time that I had no place. So I would go through the hall looking in every room, pretending that I was looking for somebody, you see, because I had nobody. So I just remember that feeling of being on the outside. And you all see it in the commercials or the pictures where there's somebody outside and there's Christmas party inside and everybody's laughing and drinking, and somebody's outside looking through the frosted window. Well, that is the image of suffering as Buddha described it. That being separate from yourself, in duality, being outside of your own experience, and no matter what you do, there's this little judgment, well, it could be better, or you didn't do it right, or you failed, or something, some criticism, some comment. It's kind of like eternal Facebook in your head. You're commenting on everything that you do. You can't just do something. You have to comment on it. So you're kind of like always outside of yourself, And to me, for some reason, I don't know why, that was intense, that was suffering, and I did not understand it, So after I got out of high school, I went to the University of Virginia to be a doctor. My father was a naval officer, but I didn't want to be a doctor, so I became a drunk. So everybody at UVA did that. This was 1955, so you were expected to drink but yet maintain your sense of control. So that was the challenge. Well, I didn't have the control, so in the second semester I withdrew, and then I said, well, I failed my father. What little money he'd saved up for my college I blew, so I'm going to join the Navy. It was kind of like going to the Foreign Service, not Foreign Service, but back in the 30s and the 40s, back in the 30s, the Laurel and Hardy movies, the French Foreign Legion. That's where people went to find themselves. They were busted out, they lost everything. They go sign up for the French Foreign Legion. Bunch of losers, So I was going to join the Navy to find myself. But for some reason, I wanted to get into the submarines, because that was, this was 1956. So anyway, so I became a sonarman and I got in the submarines. Now this is ironic because this was a metaphor for my life to come. Now what is a sonarman? But he listens, okay? If you're a sonarman on the surface, destroyer is active. He's looking for the submarines. He's sending out underwater radar. Bing, boop. He's listening. Bing, boop. And the sonarman in the submarine doesn't do that because he'll be detected. So he's just listening. He can hear you 60 miles away. Underwater, you see. So anyway, I learned the metaphor of run silent and run deep. And when you're down deep, there might be a hurricane up there. Just calm. Coffee still on the table, nothing moves, very still. You can hear the ships up on the surface looking for you. It's very quiet. Everybody takes their shoes off. Nobody makes a sound. You don't drop anything on the floor. Everybody gets in their bunk. If you're not on watch, you get in your bunk so nobody makes any noises because you don't want any sonarman up there. You hear that wrench. You don't want to hear it. So this became kind of like, of course at the time I didn't know it, but looking back, it became a metaphorical stage, which still gives me great insight and energy. And while I was in the submarines, I was on this one particular sub for 3.5 years, and it was a diesel electric boat. This was during that time, the nuclear boats were being built, and so young sailors would come on our boat, get qualified, and then go on to the next nuclear boat. But I stayed. I stayed there. And the submarine was a diesel electric, and it's kind of ironic because I now have a Honda Accord that's a gas electric. But so I was on that for 3.5 years. And I went there to find out who I was and what I was going to do. And all I really discovered was I wanted to get out of the Navy. So that, and I remember my sonarman, who was in for 20 years. Everybody was doing time for 20 years. And you said, take care of this. He said, no, well, you don't get out. You take care of this sonar gear here, and it'll take care of you. In 20 years, you'll be able to retire, sit back, and drink beer and pump gas. And that was the good life. So it's something and everybody was walking around with these short time chains on. It was a bathtub chain, and you clip off a little ball as your months go by. I only got 10 more months to go, and it was short timers. Wow. So it was kind of like, putting in time for some future reward that was not guaranteed. So anyway, during that time, I met my wife. And one more thing about the submarines that I think was the underwater kick I got beneath the covers was that I discovered Thomas Merton. And I began to read the works of Thomas Merton, particularly the autobiography, 7-Story Mountain. And I began to question why this academic, intellectual young man would give up a career that I would have loved to have had, give up the whole thing and go live in a Trappist monastery, which was a very strict monastery. They took the vow of silence. That was it. You just obeyed the abbot. And if you wanted to go to the bathroom, you got permission. It was not that strict, but I mean, it was a strict discipline monastery. Well, it was an ashram. So I just couldn't understand why. So I read his books, and I began to see why. So he really connected me with Christian mysticism and the great Christian mystics of the Middle Ages, St. John of the Cross and Teresa and Master Eckhart, and a lot of these Christian yogis. They weren't called yogis, but they were on the same path. Mystics, they wanted to know knowledge of God and not just relationship with God in a church. So there's a big difference. Both are okay, but the mystical path, the knowledge of God, is basically the attic of religion. And the main floor is everybody gets to God by getting into a church. So it's kind of like a group relationship, you see, which is fun. But the mystical path is usually the attic path of all the major religions. And so that really fascinated me. And so when I left the Navy, I met my wife while I was in the Navy, and she was going to be an English teacher. And so I said, well, I'll be an English teacher. I like to read. So I tried that out for 3 years. And the unexpected happened, as usual, on the path. I went to bed one night. But I was, well, after I left Christian mysticism and Thomas Merton, I went to college, I got a degree, minored in philosophy, and I began to dive into rationalism, philosophy, theology. You know, this was the way out. This was the way to truth, a rational path. So I really dove into philosophy and the rational path, Western psychology, everything like that. And but that had limitations. You know, that had an end to it. So then I began to ironically, the next book that influenced me, the first book was the autobiography of Thomas Merton, and the next book that influenced me was the autobiography of a yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And he was a Eastern master or yogi who came to this country to teach, and he taught self-realization, and there are many self-realization centers around now. And he wrote the autobiography of a yogi, and I can't tell you how many people I've run into that read that book and was influenced by it, because he spoke with such certainty and honesty about India and the mysticism of India and the yogis that he knew, and this rather secret realm or area of India that most Westerners and a lot of Indians probably don't even recognize. Because you don't recognize these gurus. They may be sitting on a trash dump.
Yeah.
You know, they don't walk around, you know, with Cadillacs and live in mansions and all that. You know, so they're not hard to see. So anyway, that was an influence on me. And during this time, it was 1968. And so one day somebody said, listen, I've got this interesting audio tape of Krishnamurti. You ought to listen to it. I'd never heard of him, so I put my earphones on, and I put the audio tape on and went to sleep. And I woke up the next morning, and the picky little commenting personality that I went to sleep with was gone. And I looked in the mirror, and I just broke out laughing. I just recognized myself. I said, well, you're finally here. Hello. It wasn't an image. There was a shift in the center from being outside of myself to being in myself. Totally myself. Totally in my center. At the center of the universe, I felt. And suddenly, I had a little motorcycle, and I was like Evel Knievel on the motorcycle. And I would read Walt Whitman, and I was reading Walt Whitman as he read it. I listened to music, and I was the music. I was teaching. I went to school, and I looked at the hallway, and all the eyes of the students were glowing with light. You know, it was like their soul light was shining through, and I seemed to be in a space that was prior to other people's thinking. In other words, other people were thinking what to do, and I was just doing it. Staying on my head, I started doing lotus postures. I never heard of lotus posture or yoga, you know, when I started doing spontaneous yoga postures. And so there was a brief period of intense awakening or samadhi that I had fallen into, kind of like Alice in Wonderland. You know, what in the hell has happened here? I had no idea. You know, there was no training oh, I got to get to this state. I had no idea what state it was, you see. But I knew something radical had happened. And so I went to school, started teaching, and I threw this was back in the 60s, and it was really in vogue to throw the textbook in the trash can and start speaking from the heart, you know, like Do Sir with Love and all these movies, you know. And so I threw the grammar book in the trash can, and I started cloning Krishnamurti, and I'm on the board teaching about the mind and everything, and half the class runs down in front and they start taking notes, and the other half of the class is sitting in the back, looking, what the hell's going on with that? So those are the liberals down there, and those are the conservatives in the back today. those were the baby boomers. That's where it started. So anyway, I knew. So you know, it was in May. I had 1 month to go, 3 weeks to go. I don't know. I had the class stand on their head, so everybody was standing. I didn't do it. I just got on the desk and stood on my head, and everybody else did it. And the principal walked by. I knew my days were numbered. I knew that, you know, that I was not fit for an institution. That something had happened, and I could no longer. And I really, you know, and I discovered my true nature when I was teaching that way. When I was teaching. The person that was teaching before was not very good at it. You know, I was just doing the job, you know, but it wasn't heart. There was no heart in it. I didn't know what the heart was. So anyway, my heart was there, you see, but it wasn't in sync with the institution. And I think we all discover that kind of disjunction, you know, where the choice, do I just surrender to the institution and do the law of the institution? Or do I follow the heart, you know? And what do you do when they're not in sync? What do you do? You know? Well, for some reason, I followed the heart. So we just left and packed up, and I had met some principal who was in Miami, was opening a new school in Miami for, it was a brand new idea where all the team teaching and all of this beautiful stuff and all this new age stuff. Well, there wasn't a new age in 1968. But yeah, so he said, come on down, I'll give you a job. And so I just picked up, and I just quit this teaching. We got in our truck and we went down, just packed up our stuff and moved to Miami. And I had a friend we stayed with, and I went to the school and says, like a real idiot, you know, well, I'm here. And he said, who are you? We don't have any openings. So, but then in a few days, he called up and said, you know, somebody just quit, so come on over. So I got the job, and right off, the heart teaching came up, and I could not comply with the curriculum. I had to speak from the heart. And this was, of course, my immaturity, you know, of the great immaturity of, I call it a premature awakening. A premature awakening is a blessing and a curse. A premature awakening is a blessing because you're awake and you see the truth of yourself, but it's a curse because then you think you're somebody. You know, and now I'm somebody special, you see. And now I've got to prove that I'm special by having students and all that, you see. So that's the curse. So anyway, I just reverted back to my my heartfelt teaching, and I was not complying with the institutional requirements, even though it was very liberal. And so I decided that I could not teach. I had to leave. So I left, and I got a job as an ambulance attendant. And then, what am I going to do with myself? There is a poem that I discovered recently, just a single line, but it describes the inner yearning, and the line goes like, a bodiless child full of life, crying in the gloom with a frog voice, what shall I be? What shall I be? So this awakening is not the end. It's really the beginning of your being, you know. But there is still this frog voice calling out, what shall I be? What service shall I, what can I do that's useful? How can I serve God, or how can I serve myself or the world, you see? So this question is there. And if you follow it and if you listen to it, it will take you on an adventure. So anyway, we bought a little houseboat in Miami. We were living on that, and I got, what am I should be? Well, I'm some kind of spiritual teacher. I don't know what the hell but that's what I want to do. And so I'll become a minister. So I knew a Presbyterian minister. He was a friend of mine. So I said, I want to go. What school did you go to? He said, the Richmond Theological Seminary. Well, I'll go there. He said, okay. Well, he sent me a recommendation. And I sent an application. And they didn't accept it. So while I was waiting, they didn't tell me anything. So we went up to this minister's friend cabin in Vermont for the summer. And I got a job teaching at their little private academy while I was waiting for this my life's course to come out. And so they finally said, well, come on, you're accepted. But then I just signed a contract to teach. So I said, how about if I wait until the next term or something? So okay. So then when Christmas came around, I decided I would, I can't wait, I'm going to go. So we just packed up and went down there. They put us in, gave us an apartment. It was over Christmas vacation. And so I got in a Hebrew class, and I remember sitting in the one memory I have of that was I was sitting in the lunch room and listening to some other ministerial students talking over there, and they were talking about, well, I can accept this doctrine, but I can't accept that. So they were already arguing about what they could accept and what they couldn't in order to surrender to the law of the institution, you see, in order for them to fit in. And also remember the music that was playing during that lunchtime. That was my last meal there. My last meal. And I remember it was the Edwin Hawkins singers singing Oh Happy Day. Oh Happy Day. And I just remember that music, Oh Happy Day. And then the administrator called me out and said, I got to talk to you. And we were talking out, and he says they rejected your application. So it was looking back, it was the happiest day, you see. At that moment, I cried. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? You see, on my path, I was going to be the Son of God and teach God's word, and save the world. And oh my God, just what my father again flunked out. One of my favorite advertisements from that time was the Charlie the Tuna Fish commercial. If you've ever seen that, it was about this little tuna that was always trying to get to the tuna factory, but he was never good enough, which is ironic because, you die when you go to the tuna factory. But it was always, sorry, Charlie, you're not ready yet. So that too was kind of like the metaphor of my life. So anyway, so I got kicked out of seminary, and so we ended up being house parents for the retarded. And during that time, we were house parents in Norfolk at the Hope House Foundation. Hope House. It was a foundation created to give homes for adult retarded when their parents died. But nobody died, so they had a lot of empty beds. So we took in any loser that the state couldn't take care of. Right? Come out of juvenile detention home, some kid, come on in. Somebody who just got thrown out of his house by his parents, come on in. Open the door, somebody be knocking on the door with a bag, come on in. So we had it was a mixed house of, it was a great 2 years. But during that time, a friend of mine, who was also the one who had lent me the autobiography of Yogi, had found his teacher, a yoga teacher guru in Cleveland. And I knew something had happened to him because the first time I met him, he had been traveling around the world and had been to Afghanistan. Well, this was before Afghanistan became the Afghanistan it is. It was a great place to travel because it was full of drugs. So he had all this hash and marijuana. And the next time I met him, he had hash and marijuana in one hand and autobiography of Yogi in the other. And then the next time I met him, he just had the autobiography of Yogi. You know, so I, you know, something has changed here. I said, well, what's going on? He said, well, I have this teacher up in Cleveland, Alice Christensen, and she's starting the Light of Yoga Society. And I knew right away, because I connected with him, that connection was a valid connection for me. So I had to go up there. So Alice was going to be at his house in Pennsylvania while she was giving some talks. Alice was a very strange woman. She was a middle-aged housewife in Ohio, and she started having dreams by visiting by this Indian Swami. And she didn't know what yogi was or what, nothing. She's just doing Midwest housewife, and she started having these visitations, and then he began to appear in her bedroom, and he was Swami Sivananda from Hardwar, from the Kashmir, and so she looked him up in the dictionary. He lived, you know, it's real, and so they began to correspond, and so she was going to go see him. He began to teach her, and she was going to go see him, but then she got he died, but she got a message from him, apparently a note, I'm foggy, but your teacher will come. So she got involved with the Theosophical Society or something, and they said, well, we got this Indian Swami coming to speak, will you go pick him up? So she went to pick him up, and when she met him, he said, Alice, I've come for you. So that was her guru. And so she began to go to Indian study, and so when she was ripe, or she felt she was ripe, she started the Light of Yoga Society. And then Swami Rama would, when he came to the East Coast, or came to America, he would stop by and give people mantras and hold meditation, and so he was kind of like the master behind the master of Alice and her Light of Yoga Society, which really attracted all these young people in the 70s, 60s who had been awakened to this spiritual movement or vibration, and they needed discipline. And I needed discipline, because the one thing I realized when this awakening happened was, I got to find a teacher. I got to find a master. I got to find somebody who can help me to ride this tiger, because remember, did y'all see the Life of Pi? Well, that was about living with the tiger. Well, this Shakti, that when it's awakened, is a tiger, and you better learn how to ride it or it will eat you, which is what the movie was about. But anyway, I knew I had to find some path or discipline or somebody who could give me some direction. Teacher, you all are lucky here because you have this center which gives you some direction. It's kind of like, a center like this is kind of like a riverbank. So you've got all this water coming out. Where's it going to go? Well, it's just going to dissipate unless you put it into a riverbank for a while, until you can, you know, find out how to use it. But anyway, so I started with the Light of Yoga Society, and basically I was going to be a yogi spiritual teacher. I mean, it was like the mission, you know, the minister and the yogi and all that stuff just came together. And I was not interested in teaching just hatha yoga like you have today. You go to a yoga in the mall, you know, you're not going to get the spiritual addict to it. You're just going to get the main floor. This is going to make you feel better and all that, you see. But there was no goal, there was no, what I was interested in was to actualize and make permanent my awakening. See, because it had dissipated. See, the awakening had dissipated because there was no riverbank for it. The ego had not done its work. So that's what I mean about a premature awakening. And I'm not saying don't have one. You have no control over it. But the point about it is, if you don't do the work, that when you get the awakening, it's kind of like getting a bucket of water in a bucket full of holes. You can't hold it; it's going to pour out, you know. And so then you spend. I know I did. I spent years trying to get it back. You see, I wanted to get that specialness back. But anyway, so I got in the Light of Yoga Society, and that. So was I going to move up there or not? We lived in Norfolk, and I was going to that, and I wanted to jump in whole, and so I didn't know what to do, and I went up there, and it was Swami Rama who was visiting, and he we were at a meditation at a friend's house, and he gave me a cup of tea, and I left, and I dropped into this space of the peace that passes understanding. It was like I dropped into this infinite ocean of peace, and I knew it was okay for me to come to Cleveland and pursue this path. So I went home, and I did. While I was home, I got a call saying that he had died. So it went anyway, and we began a rather topsy-turvy. For me, and I don't know for everyone, I've read this, but for me, this path was like induced schizophrenia, in the sense that it stirred up psychic dramas. It stirred up inconsistencies in my nature that had to come out, and they come out in psychodramas. I got divorced, and then I failed at divorce, and I failed at marriage. Our marriage fell apart, and we got divorced. So I failed at marriage, then I failed at divorce, and we got remarried. So I have a lot of experience in failure. So my wife is here, by the way, so you know I'm telling you the truth. But anyway, so the 70s was a roller coaster for me. The marriage, I wasn't getting to the tuna factory with Alice. They were going to have a big group picture of all the yogi teachers. Everybody was a yoga teacher student, you know, and they had somebody teaching classes. It was kind of like Save the World type of thing, you know. And so they were all over there for a big group picture, and I was, oh boy, I was going to get my picture. And Alice turns, oh, not you, you're not ready. Oh, okay. But you see, that's okay. You know, there's time. In fact, this is funny. Now, when I went up to see Alice, and she was getting ready to go out and talk, and I said, I want to be your teacher. I want to be your student. And she said, okay. And so she said, she got a card or something, wrote this mantra down, said, now, here's your mantra. Say this mantra for 60 rounds, which is about an hour and a half a day. Do these asanas, got a book, wrote that. Don't eat meat, don't smoke, don't drink. Come see me in a year. Bye. And I said, wow, is that all? And I went back to Virginia and I did it. I mean, the meat fell off, the alcohol fell off, the smokes fell off, bam, nothing. And I was a yogi. So anyway, and she said, oh, at the end of the year, you can do what you want. And I thought, wow, you know, that's cool. And at the end of the year, I'll be enlightened. So, okay, so anyway, I did it, and I went up there, but I wasn't enlightened. So it's not yet. So anyway, I got dissatisfied, marriage broke up, I was free now, I was running around. And so I heard some chants by the City Yoga chants by Swami Muktananda. I don't know if you're familiar with Swami Muktananda, but back in the 70s, late 60s, he was a big Indian guru master of City Yoga, which is an ancient practice of transmission of Shakti from the guru to the disciple when they're ready. It could be through a look, a touch, whatever, Shaktipat. So he was big on that. So you didn't have to do anything. Everybody was doing yoga and all that stuff, but it was more or less guru's grace type of thing. So good, I could get to the tuna factory without having to do anything. All I had to do was just throw yes. So I did, full-hearted, you see. So then I became, let's see what happened next. Anyway, so I went to Miami. He had an ashram in Miami. They went down there. This is really strange. The South Beach, which was in late 70s, it was a bomb place. I mean, it was torn apart. South Beach was just where the drunks lived and the drugs. So they went down there and rented or leased or bought a hotel. And their team went down there like Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, they go in and build a church. They went down there and just built a palace out of this old hotel on the street. And people walked in. Oh, people like this place, not like this place in the sense that you can walk in here to meditation. So you would walk into this hotel, and it was like and Muktananda would be sitting here, and he would come in for the evening program, and then he would give Shaktipat, and other people would line up and come down to his chair, and he would have a big wand of peacock feathers, and he would pat everybody, and they would give him hats, and then he would give a hat to the next person. He was called the Swami of the hats. People would give him these little stocking caps, and he would, the next thing you know, the one you gave him would be, somebody be wearing, wait a minute, he's got my hat. So anyway, it was tremendous energy generated in this. I remember sitting in the waiting for him to come in, and when he walked in, there was a lightning flash of energy, went bam, like lightning hit right outside. This energy just, pow, I don't know who got hit, but it was tremendous energy. And the last day I was there, I was meditating and at the noon thing, and this vast space opened up, and my ego, the little commenter, I taught this little commenting guy that was always commenting on everything, he was right there in front of me like a little worm on a hook. And this light opened up, and this little worm called me, thinking, went up into the light, and then it came back down kind of like a moth that had gone into the flame and came back out, and it said, oh, that's what death is like. And so then I was back in that infinite peace that Rama had given me in his tea, and I knew I could get remarried. I knew that something had healed, that something had come together, something had integrated, and I could return to my family. So I did. And I became a meditation center leader in Cleveland, and then, this is not enough, I got to get a PhD. So I'm going to Ganeshpuri, India. Take the family, sold the house, going to Ganeshpuri, and I get my enlightenment there. Get my credentials. That's what I wanted, credentials. I wanted some, I had to be somebody. Had to be somebody. So anyway, we went, and we were there for 2 or 3 months, and he gave me a hat, and it was it's my birthday, and it was a ski cap, so he pulled it down, like this, with a little hole here, and he said, it's going to be cold where you're going. So where was I going? I was going to Southside Virginia. So we're going to Blackstone, where Tilly grew up, my wife grew up, and we were going to stay temporarily there, and here I was, a fresh yogi, just out of the guru's ashram. I was going to bring the truth to Southside Virginia. And they weren't interested in the truth. I got into the house and I put my guru's picture up on the wall, and my mother-in-law says, boy, you can't put that up here. No. That was the beginning. So that was 1981. So the